Good evening, everyone. I am Jessie Guglielmo, Education Specialist at Maddie's Fund. Tonight we have Maddie's Fund's very own Kelly Duer, who will be speaking about foster field trips, a gateway to community engagement in getting pets adopted. Kelly is currently Maddie's Foster Care Specialist and Foster Expansion Coordinator for a national study of foster care for medium and large dogs with long shelter stays. She also co-coordinates the medium and large adult dog foster apprenticeships, which bring shelter leaders from across the country together to learn how to implement foster programs for adult dogs. Kelly's work has been featured in many national publications, websites, and networks. Additionally, Kelly has presented at various conferences, including Best Friends National Conference, American Pets Alive, and HSUS Animal Care Expo. Before we get started, let's go over a few housekeeping items. Please take a look at the left side of your screen where you'll see a Q&A window. That's where you'll ask questions during the presentation. Please get your questions in early. Questions submitted late in the presentation may not be processed in time for a response. Also, don't forget to check out the green Resource tab at the bottom of your screen for lots of great resources regarding this presentation. If you need help with your connection during the presentation, you can click the Help widget at the bottom of your screen. This presentation will be available on demand within 24 hours should you wish to view it again. Kelly, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you so much, Jessie, and thank you everybody for joining us here tonight. What we'll be talking about tonight is not just all of the many reasons your organization should consider starting a foster field trip program, but the logistics of several programs at different shelters and how these programs work hand in hand with marketing pets for adoption, and the preliminary results of some really exciting research. My name is Kelly, and I'm Maddie's Foster Care Specialist. For the last year, I've had the amazing opportunity to visit shelters across the country as part of the research study. So we'll be talking a little bit about what we're learning in the study. I'm going to start with a story. One of my first trips was to Louisville Metro Animal Services, a shelter that was participating in the study. When I asked which dog they wanted me to take for short-term foster, they asked me to take Nonnie. She had been at the shelter for over 200 days as part of a custody case that had just recently been resolved. She was friendly, but she was super depressed. You know how other dogs, when you go up to the kennel, they'll come up and they'll, be jumping and tongues hanging out, wagging, maybe barking to, get your attention or something. Nonnie didn't do that. She would just lay on her bed and just kind of look listlessly into space until you'd gone into her kennel and pretty much gotten right up on her to get to put on the leash. So here's what happened when I took her out. She was utterly, deliriously happy. When I posted this video in the shelter's internal volunteer and foster group, people started lining up to take her out. It was amazing. When I brought her back, we didn't even have time to put her back in the kennel or take off her harness. Somebody was there to pick her up to go on the next trip. So for the next week or so, she went on a whirlwind of field trips until one of the fosters realized she was the one, and she got adopted. Louisville's foster coordinator, Stephanie, came to one of the first medium and large adult dog foster apprenticeships. She was literally on her first day back on the job after that, and she started the field trip foster program immediately. It turned out to be wildly successful. She focused on the medium and large dogs who were in the Louisville's intake shelter. The public was invited and orientations were on the spot. We collected a whole bunch of data on the program, which was really cool. And things like the number of fosters the shelter had each month and the number of field trips that were taken. In less than a year, Louisville has tripled their number of foster caregivers. About 350 field trips have been taken, and 66 extra dogs were adopted as a direct result of the program. This includes dogs who were adopted by their foster or by somebody who they met while they were on their foster trip, And those were adopted because the photos and stories that their fosters had taken had gone up on the main page of the shelter, and somebody had noticed them and come in and adopted them. We're also getting data on the dog's behavior. Shelter staff are filling out a survey before the dog goes on a field trip, and then when the fosters come back from the field trip, they fill out the same survey on the dog's behavior. So I'm going to try out this Meet You button, the pulse check, and I'm going to ask you, how many of you guys think that dog's behavior is going to improve in field trip foster? So I think you should have little thumbs up and thumbs down. So if there's anyone, yeah. All right, so you guys are very smart. Looks like a good amount of people are thinking that the behavior is going to improve. Excellent. So, as you can see here, the data is showing some significant differences from the shelter to field trips. Dogs on outings are more playful, happier, more confident, and more relaxed than dogs in the shelter. We're also seeing a lot of reductions in negative behaviors. Dogs on field trips are less nervous, less insecure, and less anxious. They're less boisterous, as in like they're less bouncy and noisy. They don't show as many attention-seeking behaviors such as barking for attention. They're less fearful and show a lot less of the shaking and trembling. My personal favorite is that they show less repetitive behavior like pacing, walking in circles, and jumping. So, what is field trip foster care? It's basically a short-term version of foster that can last from even just 1 hour to all day. During field trips, fosters can take dogs to the park. They can go to retail stores that allow dogs, like Home Depot. They can go to outdoor shopping areas or even to the foster's own home for a romp in the backyard or like a nap on the couch. So this is our first poll question.
Thank you, Kelly. So we have reached our first poll question for the evening, and it is, what is the main reason you are interested in field trip foster care? So go ahead and click on your screen and don't answer in your Q&A box. We'll give you a few seconds here to go ahead and get that in. Just remember also to get your questions in early instead of later on in the presentation so that we can go ahead and make sure to get them answered. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go on to the results slide. All right, it looks like we have a 75% to increase adoptions. What do you think, Kelly?
That sounds about right. Yeah, awesome. And to save the lives of big dogs, yeah, that's I think that's great, and it definitely will. So there are so many benefits to adding a field trip component to your foster program that I had to make the wording really tiny on the slide because there's so many reasons. With busy lives, the flexibility of short-term foster is attractive to a lot more people. Since it's easier to commit a few hours or a day to fostering than multiple weeks or months, outing fostering allows your organization to onboard a lot of new fosters for medium and large dogs, engaging your community in a whole new way. Also, some foster caregivers who try short-term fostering realize they're also suited for longer-term fostering as well. Foster field trips increase the visibility of shelter dogs in the community, which often leads to increased adoptions. At most animal shelters, dogs are evaluated inside the building. The assessments aren't always indicative of how the dog is going to act outside in a home. So getting feedback on a dog's behavior outside the shelter in a natural setting can be a really valuable tool for information on a dog's behavior, and field trips provide an avenue for your organization to do this. Having more information on a dog's behavior outside the shelter can also help you make better adoption matches. As Stephanie told us, our return rate for field trip dogs is almost non-existent. Day trip fostering makes it easy for your organization to get great content for social media and to market dogs for adoption. Most fosters enjoy helping to market their foster dog as much as they like going on the outings themselves. Personally, I love to do it. And it's super reinforcing for fosters to see the photos and video they took on an outing posted on your organization's main social media pages. Spending time outside of the kennel is really important for dogs' mental health, and getting off the shelter grounds, even for just an hour, it can be just a hugely enriching experience for dogs. When foster caregivers are on outings with shelter dogs, members of the community almost always ask about them, especially when they've got, brightly colored Adopt Me bandanas or leashes on, so it's very obvious that they are available for adoption. People will just come up and talk to you. It's great, and it really increases community engagement exponentially. And the more that shelters know about the dogs in their care, the more we can combat the stigma of the shelter dog as an unknown. Even something as simple as knowing that, like, French fry likes a puppuccino with its walk can help forge that connection with a potential adopter and can help the public to rethink that stereotype. And then finally, a dog who goes on an outing almost always gains at least one advocate, usually more. When somebody spends time with a dog, they make a personal connection, and this often leads to things like networking among friends, sharing and commenting on posts, and finding other ways to get the pup noticed. So when you're designing a foster field trip program, there's some things you can think about to make the design for the program work best for your organization. Think about things like, what is your daily schedule for your shelter? What time do the doors open and close, and are there any days during the week that you are closed? Or times that dogs could benefit from some increased interaction. What time do you open for adoptions? Do you have a high or low intake? And how many dogs do you usually have on the adoption floor? What is the average length of stay for adult dogs, and how often are they getting out of their kennels? And how much time does staff have to devote to the program? These are, things that can help you design the program in a way that will work really well for your organization and for your population. So the trips can be tailored to your organization's needs. So for example, say your organization has a high intake and you're open every day of the week. It might be beneficial to allow field trips anytime so that more dogs can get out into the community. If you open the doors at noon and have a short length of stay, arranging field trips during the times your doors are closed might work better for you. Programs can be designed to add minimal extra work for your staff, as you'll see in the upcoming slides. But first, we have a poll question.
Thank you, Kelly, for that information. We have come to our second poll question of the evening. If your organization has a current field trip foster program, who is allowed to participate? So again, answer this question on your screen and not in the Q&A box. And also, I just wanted to remind everybody that if you are looking for handouts that might be going along with this presentation, go ahead and check out the green resource icon at the bottom of your screen. There's a lot of great handouts there. Okay. And here are our results, Kelly. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds, oh, wow. Sorry, I just had to scroll down. So yes, that sounds about right. And it's awesome to see that a lot of people don't have this program. I really hope that that this can kind of tip the scales for you guys. So we're going to talk about logistics at two different shelters, Austin Animal Center and Fredericksburg SPCA in Virginia. The Austin Animal Center's program is open to existing fosters and volunteers. And the program, what's great about it, it adds virtually like zero work for the staff. The only thing they really have to do is kind of like troubleshooting and also helping to put the social media, the marketing things that their field trip fosters create, like photos and video, up on the main page. Their program actually encompasses overnight field trips and overnights, but just for the purposes of this webinar, we'll just talk about the field trip component. Fredericksburg SPCA's program, Adventure Tales, is open to the public, and they have minimized barriers to participation. Both of the shelters allow field trips anytime, and the programs work hand in hand with social media. So we're going to play a little video, and it will tell you a little bit more in depth about the logistics of these two programs.
The foster program at Austin Animal Center is run by essentially 3 foster coordinators. The field trip fostering program essentially works without us. We allow volunteers who have completed level 1 training to take a dog out on a field trip. That process is fairly simple. Volunteers can pretty much pick any dog that's available. We ask that they review the dog's notes. We want them to be fully prepared if they get that animal out and maybe put it in a car, maybe it doesn't ride well in the car. We want them to know as much as we know. They do a lot of the work themselves. They put a sign on the dog's kennel saying, "I'm going for a field trip." They mark out on the whiteboard that the dog is on a field trip, and then they check out with customer service and they say, "Hey, I'm taking this dog and I'll be back around this time." We have a collection of supplies, so Adopt Me vests. Volunteers are trained to put on Easy Walk harnesses and leashes, and we even have little go bags that have treats and business cards, extra poop bags. One thing that we found really successful is when two volunteers, or a foster and a volunteer, pair up and they take a dog on a field trip together. And so then one person is the handler and one person is the photographer. Every time somebody posts field trip photos on our internal Facebook page, I grab those instantly and I put them on our main page because it's such a compelling story to tell. It's so engaging for the community. It gives people a way to connect with an animal that they wouldn't have otherwise connected had they just seen a photo of it in its kennel or walked by it and it was, just sitting in its kennel. It can mean everything. It can mean the difference between sitting another month in a kennel and then getting adopted the next week.
In 2017, we officially launched Adventure Tales, and it's just been a huge success from the beginning. Bringing people in who wouldn't otherwise have come in the first place, learning about shelter animals, learning about why shelter animals are amazing, learning about being safe with shelter animals, and the animals get to get out into the community and get a break from the shelter, which is awesome. And what's happened is we've seen huge increase in adoption numbers across the board, but especially for the animals who go out on the Adventure Tales, because we're able to get really great information on what are they like, what do they enjoy doing, how are they in the car. As soon as we post an Adventure Tale, that animal is typically adopted within 24 hours. So we've just seen a huge success. This is a really low barrier program, and we designed it that way for a purpose. We want anyone at all to be able to come in, check out an animal, sign our waiver, and walk out the front door. So how it works: from walking in the front door, you express interest, you fill out a waiver, you can walk around the facility and choose your own animal, which people really find fun, and a staff member leashes them up. We do collar and harness for safety, and then you're off. We give you our hashtags, we give you our email, our cell phone numbers, you send us photos, and then as long as you're back by 6 o'clock and everyone is safe, then we're happy. Initially, one of the big questions to me was, what if? Enter any number of things, like what if somebody steals an animal? What if the animal gets loose? And I can tell you, we've had 0 incidents, and this has been going on since 2016, in a big way though, since Earth Day 2017, and we have not had a single incident. I think that fear stands in the way a lot of times, but not for us. People would say to me, "Oh, you're gonna let the dogs go camping? They can go paddle boarding?" And I'm like, heck yeah, they're not prisoners here. We want them to get out. We want them to experience life, because ultimately, and we've seen this, it does improve their adoption rates and it makes them less stressed in the shelter. And that's what we're all about.
I was going to say this at the end of the presentation, but if you are on Maddie's Pet Forum, or if you would like to join, we have an adult dog foster group. I'm going to see if I can post the videos in the group. So we'll go on group walks. So these are another great way to increase visibility in the community and get dogs out of the shelter. I kind of consider them to be kind of like foster field trips, but in a little bit of a more supported environment. Volunteers can be trained to lead or assist with group walks, and that takes the shelter, some of the pressure off the shelter staff. Group walks are really good for dog socialization, and they can also increase community engagement. Seriously, there is literally nothing that turns heads as much as a giant group of dogs with Adopt Me vests on. And of course, the opportunities for great new marketing material are greatly increased. Ark Rescue of Georgia has a really successful program focused on group walks. They're open to the public. They advertise their walks on Facebook via Facebook events, and they focus on their longer stay dogs. Participants need to be 18 or they can be 16 with a parent or guardian. They're asked to go by the shelter before the event to get matched with a dog. Training is on the spot, so there are very few barriers. Staff assists with making sure harnesses are on properly and bringing water and other needed items to the walk. They have a large military population. They have a lot of guys from there who come and walk dogs with them. And now we have our next poll question.
Thank you, Kelly. So our next poll question is, what do you consider to be the biggest barrier or challenge in implementing a field trip foster program at your organization? Go ahead and answer on your screen and not in the Q&A window. I'll give you a few more seconds to answer. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and advance to the results screen. And it looks like the majority say concerns about risk or liability. What do you think, Kelly?
That is probably the #1 question that I have heard out there about it. So, yeah, that seems very, very common. So, field trip foster programs, they're really inexpensive to run. A lot of shelters they make an online wish list where they put needed items like harnesses and leashes, and then they put please ask to the community for supplies. Adopt Me vests can be made by members of your community. And some shelters have had success with partnering with local businesses for program sponsorship and supply donations. So there's several things you might want to consider for your program. Creating laminated signs and putting them on the kennel when a dog is taken on a field trip can make it a lot easier for volunteers and caretakers to know where that dog is. You can create a list of good outing locations nearby or ask a volunteer to create one for you. There are some examples of these in the handbook, which is in the resources section. I'd suggest using 1 or 2 types of harnesses so that everyone can learn how to put them on and they can show each other how to do it. I have been in that situation where I've been taking a dog out and I'm presented with a giant box full of harnesses and I have to figure out how to use one of them. And you know, I think if it's possible to have 1 or 2 types, it does make it a lot easier and probably safer as well. Adopt Me vests and leashes will definitely draw attention to your dog. And consider having a volunteer or someone create business cards with your organization's information on it and a space for the dog's name and ID number in case people stop you, you know, while you're walking and are interested in adopting. It happens all the time. Training volunteer assistants can save a lot of time for the shelter staff and can help your program run a lot more smoothly. Assistants can help with or even manage the programs. They can do everything from gathering needed supplies to helping fosters put on harnesses to logging fosters in and out of the software, depending on your organization. And marketing your program, this is my favorite part. It's really easy, and there are a lot of opportunities to do it. So this one is kind of just a call for field trip fosters, and it just explains what they're doing and why, and has some cute pictures of people on field trips. You can also post stories from your outings, and just about every time you post a story from your outings, at least one person is going to ask, how do I sign up? So, you know, best thing to do is probably just put the information on how to sign up in the post with it, because people will be interested. Also, make sure the media knows about your program so that they can help spread the word as well. And marketing pets from inside the shelter can be really difficult for several reasons. You've got your backgrounds and your situations you can put the pets in are all limited. You know, most shelters, you have several different backgrounds. You've got maybe your play yard, maybe a training room, your lobby, maybe the pet's kennel. And, you know, there's not a whole lot of variety within the shelter, but also shelter stress can make it really hard for you to get photos and video of pets looking relaxed and engaged. Stress tends to limit a pet's behavioral repertoire, and so it can be really tough to get to know a pet's cute quirks and strengths, which are the things that are like the key to making a connection with a potential adopter. This is why field trip foster can be really helpful. Probably the easiest way to get great marketing from outings on your organization's social media page is to create an internal social media page for fosters, staff, and volunteers. Fosters can post photos and stories from their outings on the page, and your organization can just kind of mine that content for main page posts. And what's great too is that your fosters end up getting two kinds of like really great reinforcements, because when you're a foster and you post, oh, I just took this dog on an outing and posted like these cute pictures, everybody likes them and they all comment, oh, this is great, I'm so happy seeing him out. And it really is rewarding to your fosters. And then seeing them up on the main page is immensely rewarding as well. So this is an example of this happening, and I really like this example because Faith has really adorable teeth, but also just the whole thing is, so there are two fosters took Faith on an outing, and they posted this in Austin Animal Center's internal group, and the shelter basically simply had to cut and paste the photos and some of the fosters' own words up on the Facebook page, and people loved it. It was like a really great post. But what I really, really like about it is that when the fosters did it, they mentioned that she had fallen in love with this pink bed at one of the stores, and the shelter, when they posted that on the main page, made sure to include that information. And then take a look down here at the bottom. Somebody bought her that pink bed. And like, you know, we're talking about community engagement. And we're talking about, you know, dogs getting out, and just because somebody, you know, isn't maybe able to take that dog on an outing, but they might be at home and they might want to buy that pink bed. So I think I just really like that. So day outing for foster programs can provide a great many benefits to your organization, including increased community engagement, the opportunity for exciting social media content and better marketing of your dogs, and more comprehensive canine enrichment and assessment. It can open up a world of possibilities for your organization and the dogs in your care. For more information on field trip foster programs, including operating procedures, templates, some detailed information on programs we talked about here, click on the resources icon. There's a short-term foster manual in there, and then also a marketing manual, which will tell you a little more about marketing from foster care. Additionally, a new nonprofit named Mutual Rescue just came out with a toolkit for starting field trip foster programs. So if you can go to their site, mutualrescue.org, or find a link to it in the resource section of our short-term foster manual. Lastly, we're going to take some questions, but if your question doesn't get answered, or if you think of something later, or if you're a person who's watching this, you know, several days later, Maddie's Pet Forum was just begun, and we have a group in there, Adult Dog Foster Care. Please come in, pose your questions. We have a great big group and lots of different shelters with different types of programs. So I think it'll be great for everyone to learn from each other. And thank you so much for watching. I really hope this webinar gave you some helpful information and encourages you to move forward with adding field trip foster to your menu of foster programs.
Thank you very much, Kelly, for all that great information. We do have a few questions, so we're going to go ahead and start that now. And I'm going to be pressing the first one to your screen in just a second. Okay, so our first question is, does it stress the dog to take him out and then back to the shelter again? Does it confuse the dog?
This is a question that I have heard a lot, actually. And luckily, we just got some data that we'll be talking about in the next webinar on overnight fosters. And what the data showed was that with overnight fosters, the dog's cortisol levels, which is basically the stress hormone, went down during foster, and then when the dog was returned to the shelter, it ended up going back up to what it was before, but it didn't go higher, which I think is really important, because that's showing that the dog isn't more stressed because they're coming back to the shelter. What I have seen, and what I think a lot of people that I know have seen is when you take a dog out on a foster field trip, they come back so relaxed. I take a lot of dogs who have shelter stress on foster field trips, and it's great, especially if you take them like before the shelter opens. If it opens at like noon. I know in Fairfax on Saturdays they have a group walking at 8 and the shelter opens at 10. So you get the dogs out there, you give them a long walk, and then when you come back to the shelter, everybody's just kind of like relaxed, and the potential adopters come in, and the dogs are just awesome. And they're not like jumping and, you know, and barking and like all hyper because they just had their walk and they're just like, hey guys. So, you know, from, with that research, I think is kind of like the other component, but also from experience and the experiences of others, I think that actually they really do help.
Okay, thank you very much, Kelly, for answering that. We have our next question ready, and it's going to show up on your screens in just a moment. Okay, so it's a little long, but stick with me. Los Angeles City Animal Services achieved no-kill status for dogs at the end of 2017. Nevertheless, the city requires an LAPD background check, principally for history of animal abuse, for all volunteers, fosters, and adopters. They also require classroom training and some hands-on experience with dogs before allowing volunteers to interact with the animals. Are you confident that members of the public are generally competent to take dogs on outings?
I think that, yes, I think they are. I mean, I do, and we adopt to the public. So, but I think that, you know, each shelter does have different rules and things, and so I think that, you know, for a shelter that requires background checks and classroom trainings and things like that, you can still do a field trip foster program with your volunteers and fosters who have gone through your training. So I think that, I think that members of the public, your program can be tailored to your own shelter and to the needs of your shelter. But in general, yes, I do think the public are competent, and I think that especially with some on-site training, you know, on-the-spot training, that can be helpful as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Kelly. We have our next question. How is field trip fostering different from just allowing shelter volunteers to take dogs on field trips or being walked? Is this just semantics?
If your shelter allows your volunteers to take dogs off the shelter grounds for you know, a period of time to all day, then yeah, it does sound like it's semantics. A lot of the shelters that I've been to don't. Generally, volunteers have to stay on the shelter's grounds. So in most programs, it is very different. But if there's a shelter, you know, that has volunteers that are allowed to take the dogs off the grounds, then it does sound very similar.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Here is our next question. It's a short one. Do you have a sample form to share to give fosters to fill out about the dogs they foster?
Take a look in the manual in the resources section. I believe there is one that one of the shelters made and gave out to their field trip fosters. But if not, I'm gonna have to look after this. I can't remember if I put it in there or not, but I will put it in the adult dog foster group on Maddie's Pet Forum.
Thank you, Kelly. That'll be really helpful.
An extra. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So our next question, I know a lot of people were worried about in one of our poll questions. So, how open to potential liability does field trip fostering leave a rescue, i.e. fights at dog parks, unexpected behavior, and bites?
This is a good question. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not, you know, I don't know I can't tell you the answer to this definitely. However, I will say that I've spoken to a lot of different shelters about their field trip foster programs, and very few issues have occurred. There are, most of the programs do have certain parameters and rules that they expect the fosters to go by, and one of the main rules is no dog parks, just simply because of this. And I think that's probably a really good rule, that kind of thing. I think that most of the liability is just kind of the liability of fostering in general. If you have the rules that will protect you against, things that you can see, like dog parks, you don't know what the other dogs are going to be like there, and your dog has just been in a shelter, so it's, I think that's pretty obvious, one that you want to avoid. But I think that the other stuff is kind of just, I don't know if it would be more, I don't see any more liability than you would in just foster. If that makes sense.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Here is our next question. Did dogs go through a behavior assessment before going on a field trip? What would disqualify a dog from participating?
Yes, I don't know of any shelters that don't, well, depending on what the shelter does to assess the dog's behavior. But most of them, yes, do go through a behavior assessment. I also know of shelters who have different dot color systems to show people, like green dot dogs are dogs who are just like, their behavior in the shelter is good. It's their, regular dogs. Blue dot dogs might be, you might see some behaviors from them, like they might be timid, or they might, have a little bit of shelter stress going on. And in certain shelters, they would have like certain every volunteer could take a green dot, sorry, and then blue dots would need a little extra training. And so in a lot of shelters who have that kind of system, they match the foster to the dot color that they're trained to take. What would disqualify a dog from participating? Most shelters only send dogs who are available for adoption. If they have dogs, that they're obviously that are staff only or who they're working with, but who are not available to volunteers, they wouldn't generally send that dog on a field trip, unless it was a volunteer that, they had something worked out with before. But in general, I think that dogs who go on field trips are generally dogs who are on the adoption floor, and they would kind of match the behavior. If the dog did have shelter stress or something, they might, try to match the field trip foster to the dog so that they both have a good experience.
All right, great answer, Kelly. I have another question. Okay, what requirements do you recommend for people taking out dogs on foster? Certain hours of volunteer, dog experience?
Oh, wow. I think it's really what your shelter is comfortable with. I know that there are a lot of programs that allow the public, and I think that actually probably Mutual Rescue's guide, if you're doing it that way, I think that would probably be a really good place to start, because they do have, if you're open to the public, they have like things about how to, assess the dogs and how to make sure that you're matching the public, the people who come in with the dog, to have them have a good experience. I'm not sure that, certain hours of volunteer or dog experience is really required. I think, especially if it's, a dog who's just an all-around good dog, just about anyone should be able to handle that dog. But so I think it is really kind of what you're comfortable with, and depending on the pilot that you're doing, you may want to start out being a little conservative and then, based on experience, opening it up to more people.
Okay. We have another question, several more in fact. Okay, so here's our next one. I see that field trips require that the shelter dog is not allowed to interact with other dogs unless the manager approves. Does this mean they can't go to your home if you have a dog, or that you can't take your dog along on the field trip?
I think that that one is with a lot of the shelters that I know of, I think they put that there just so that they kind of know, all right, this dog is going to do this, or like with most shelters who have a rule like that, if they know the foster and they know that that foster has dogs who have in the past been good with dogs, that wouldn't be a problem. And so often at the shelter where I volunteer, that, you know, my dogs do meet the dogs, but that's also because the shelter knows us and they know our dogs. So I think it's really up to you. It's just so that the shelter staff can be aware of what this, but also so that fosters don't also go down the street, you know, walking and then just start introducing their dog, the foster dog, to other dogs that they don't know. I think that the rule is actually a lot more about that than the foster's own dogs, because the issue is more with dogs you don't know, because you don't know how other dogs are going to react. Your own dogs you do know. So I think that is also a factor.
Okay, that's a good point. We have another question here. What topics do you cover in orientation, and how long should it last?
You know, it's really up to you. One of the most amazing orientations that I've seen, Best Friends LA has it's a Google form, and the fosters fill in their information, and then there's like a 20-minute video, and it goes over, you know, just the basics, and the person fills out that they have seen the video, and then they answer some questions about it. And it's like so barrier-free. Like, you can do that anytime. You don't have to wait until next month on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. You can just do it, and but it also gets across the main points. And then I think I'm certain that the new fosters get a manual as well. But I really don't think it should really take that long. I would want to probably go over the rules, the basics, the things like, you know, you're not allowed to take the dog to a dog park. You know, you must keep the dog on a leash at all times, that kind of a thing. I like short and sweet, but I think it's really up to you guys.
Thank you, Kelly. Here's another question kind of along the same lines. Orientation on the spot means the dogs get to leave on the same day with the foster?
Yes. So the people would come in, and you get out the manual and, you know, talk about the really important things, and process the foster right there, so that they could, you know, in effect, sign the paperwork, talk to you for a bit about the rules, and then and take the dog.
That's great. Okay, next question. We are curious as to how the program is monitored, and how do you prevent animals from being stolen by the foster?
I have never heard of a dog being stolen by the foster, but it is it's not the first time that I've heard this question. So I think that one of the things is that even when you do orientations on the spot, you make a copy of the person's driver's license. So if they don't bring the animal back, you have the basics to be able to give to anyone. But But really, I think that if they are coming to you and signing paperwork and you know, giving their license, it is very unlikely that they would be stolen. I think either way, I mean, I don't think it was any more likely than if they were in foster care.
Okay, thank you very much. Here's our next question. Do you get a lot of negative feedback from potential adopters who are there to adopt a pet that is out on a field trip?
I think that kind of goes to tailoring your field trip program to your population. So like in Fairfax, where they have a pretty low intake, and they have about less than a dozen dogs on the adoption floor generally at a time, they don't do foster field trips all day long. They do them like usually in the mornings because the shelter opens at noon, and they also do them on Sundays when the shelter's closed. So since they do have a smaller population, it works well because then all those animals are there when they're open. But say for our Austin Animal Center, who has generally several hundred dogs on the adoption floor at any given time, it works better for them to be able to do it anytime because it helps them get the dogs out, and it helps them get them engaged, and it is less likely for people to come in for a specific pet and not be able to get them. So it really depends on your population.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another liability type of question. What do you include or would suggest on a waiver form? And also, Kelly, is there a sample waiver form in our resources or somewhere somebody can take a look at that?
Yes, actually, it should be at the end of the short-term foster manual. The Fredericksburg SPCA's waiver is in there, and I think there's another one for a weekend and overnight foster that is going to go into the new manual, but I don't know if it's in this one yet.
Okay, thank you very much. Everybody can go ahead and take a look at those. Switching a little bit gears here. Have you ever heard of a program like this focused for cats, Kelly?
Actually, I know Fredericksburg SPCA. I think they're actually looking into it. I did see something about a cat in a little push stroller, and but that's the only one that I've heard that may even be possible. But I know that also Best Friends Sanctuary does cat sleepovers, and I did one with a cat, and it was great. The cat was awesome. So I think if it's the right cat, it could really be an enriching experience for them and for the people.
That's great. Thank you, Kelly. So this is going to be our last question for the evening. I'm going to press it to the slide area right now. What happens if a dog bites somebody on one of these field trips, a stranger or the foster?
The foster would, in Fairfax at least, before they leave the shelter, they have the foster program the reception number into their phone, so that, and the animal control number. So if somebody gets bitten, they call the shelter, and then the shelter has an ACO go out and take a bite report for the person who got bit. So they would, and I believe depending on your county and the procedures there, you would probably need to get in touch with the shelter immediately and probably have an ACO take a bite report.
Okay, thank you very much, Kelly. With that, that will be the end of our presentation this evening. And again, thank you, Kelly, and all of you for sharing your evening with us. Your opinion is important to us, so please take a moment to fill out the evaluation survey by clicking on the link on the screen. And mark your calendars for the next installment in our Foster webcast series on March 8th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, where we'll be presenting about foster sleepovers, how temporary fostering can improve the lives of shelter dogs. For more information, go to www.maddiesfund.org and be sure to register. Again, thanks for your participation in our webcast tonight. Have a great evening. Good night.